Chris O'Connor here. Join the Curmudgeon Rock Report's invite-only curmudgeonly community at facebook.com/curmudgeonrock. Also look out for a Spotify playlist that pays honor to this episode.
This is the Curmudgeon Rock Report, and this is your podcast made by rock geek iconoclastic outsiders for rock geek iconoclastic outsiders. For those of you who lament that rock music has gone the way of jazz and slipped into niche genre status, we are here to keep that flame alive by providing insight, analysis, recommendations, and honest takes, not hot takes. And hey, there's a good chance you'll learn some rock history you never knew before. In our last episode, we discussed at length the birth of hip-hop. And as I'm sure you all know, hip-hop is one of the few, if any, genres whose origins and roots can be traced to one specific place and city, New York City. Well, yours truly, Curmudgeons, got to thinking. A city that has been the cultural center of the world for over 100 years surely must have inspired hundreds of songs and all kinds of music. Transfer that idea to our beloved rock music, and we came up with the title of this episode, The Top 40 Rock Songs About or in New York City. The qualifications are right there in the title. These have to be songs that either are about New York or take place in New York, with enough lyrical references to lead one to believe that the subject of the song is surrounded by the Big Apple. Secondly, they must be rock songs and all its subgenres that come with it: folk rock, blues rock, prog rock, pop rock, punk rock, new wave, indie rock, etc. Even R&B, soul, and funk, very close relatives of rock, are thrown into the mix. No jazz, no Broadway musicals or show tunes. There are thousands of New York City songs from that vein, and besides, I freaking hate musicals and show tunes. This is a rock podcast, goddammit. And no, hip-hop is not represented either. As much as we love hip-hop, let's be honest, if we include great hip-hop songs about or taking place in New York, that would be like 300 songs taking up 5 whole episodes. You want to talk about Nas's NY State of Mind? Dude, the entire Illmatic album is about New York. And that's just one of many. So, without further ado, let us begin our curmudgeonly journey through the rock and roll heart of New York and its rock and roll soul as we bring you the top 40 rock songs about or in New York City. Welcome to the Curmudgeon Rock Report.
I want to wake up in a city that doesn't sleep. Well, once upon a time, Arturo and I both did wake up in that city, and oh, how we missed the heart.
Yeah, New York City, man. Those were the days. We were there for like more than half a decade.
Yeah, we were. And, I was there twice. I was there '09 to '02, and then I came back for '05 to '07 and had the privilege and at the time what I was calling the modern day 2-bedroom in the East Village, otherwise known as I lived in the living room. It was something, but yeah, there's something about that city that is it's all about the experience, and we'll get into that with these songs. That New York is not a place that you live in. It's all about how you experience it, and there's nothing else like it. It's the most interactive city I can think of because of its uniqueness, because it's this tall, thin city. Like even out in the boroughs, it's tall and thin. And so I think it defines, and not only that, but you have this simultaneous glitziness and scuzziness. And, and so I think that
it's a city that's full of dichotomies and contradictions.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's also the city, everybody that's not from there won't understand this, but for all our folks that do live in New York, holla holla, no one can understand that it's the most anonymous city in the world. I've never felt more anonymous in my life than living in New
Yeah,
York.
it's just so many people that you actually feel lonely, and that is a theme on several of these songs.
Oh, absolutely. And well, not necessarily anonymous. Yeah, lonely is the dark side of it, but the light side is anonymous. In other words, you realize once you're there like a month or two, you realize nobody gives a fuck about you. So you can do whatever the fuck you want because nobody's
Right,
paying attention.
right.
And there's a certain freedom to that. So,
Unless you're making some kick-ass music, and then some snooty village voice rock critics will notice you.
yeah, absolutely. Hello, Bob. That said, you know where else they'll notice people, and you know where else
Wait,
they have rock critics?
where is that?
The parallel universe. And yeah,
Where they had good music critics.
yes, and rock critics that have jobs. That's an increasingly rare thing, unfortunately, as arts coverage dies. But hey, that's a topic for another day. Yes, we are here in the parallel universe, where rock is the king of the universe and is on the billboards and in the arenas and in the stadiums. It's not Taylor Swift that's in Giant Stadium. It's Ty Segall. Gosh, could you imagine?
A stadium show with Ty Segall.
Yeah, I was gonna say that would be one gnarly audience. I gotta say, yeah,
a drugged out audience too.
Yeah,
seriously, from all the stuff I've read about some of his shows.
Yeah, seriously, sign me up. So, yep. So that's a long way of saying that this is the segment in the every episode where we cover new and newish albums of some interest. Sometimes they're recommendations. Sometimes they're just examinations of things that are interesting and should interest you. And that's kind of what's going on in this episode. Although we're starting with reverence first. Our resident goatologist is back at it with with new music by Goat.
Yeah. There is probably no music podcast in the world that talks about the Swedish psychedelic rock band Goat more than this one. I'll tell you that. Well, we're at it again. Why? Because just recently, this band released an EP called Seu Sangue, which is Portuguese for your blood, spelled SEU space SANGUE. The first 4 tracks are remixes of songs from last year's excellent album, Oh Death. And the last song is the title track, which is what I'm covering and recommending here. The band shows their lyrical diversity since the song is entirely in Portuguese, in keeping with the title. Musically, it's an entrancing, beguiling slice of lush psych folk, with the sound of seagulls chirping at the beginning and leading into a lovely airy tune with synthesized cello underpinning the whole track. There's even the inevitable flute solo halfway through that adds to the song's lysergic feel. It's a song that really wouldn't feel out of place on, and probably should have been included in Oh Death. Chris?
Yeah, if there was such a thing as a psychedelic Ren Fair, this would be the house band. For sure. That's one of the reasons I love them. They have this sort of mixed sensibility where they do bring in that folk, but boy, that they acid tinge the shit out of it. It's really marvelous. And the seagulls, there's something poignant about those electric seagulls that both begin and end the track. So really strong. I gotta tell you though, the EP itself is pretty good. I'm actually a bigger fan of a standalone single that they just released called Unemployment Office.
They released that.
Yeah, it's a really strong little. It's 3 minutes 24 seconds of psychedelic pop goodness. It actually reminds me of Brian Jonestown Massacre type of hypnotic rhythm type track.
Goat have really picked up the baton that Anton Newcomb dropped quality wise a long time ago.
Yeah, but it's the same kind of exercise where it all springs from the rhythm, and there's it's all in the trance. It draws you in to expand your mind, so to speak, and it's a really deliberate thing. So, folks, I would go definitely on the streaming services and on YouTube. Check out Unemployment Office as well as Sue Swan. You say it again for me.
Seu, it's Portuguese. Seu Sangue.
Seo Sengwe, why do you sound like Austin Powers when you say that?
Well, I don't know. Okay, because I'm a sexy man.
Oh, okay, okay then. You have the voice, I have the teeth. Go figure. There you go. Definitely check out Goat's latest slice of psychedelic goodness. And so now we segue into here. I say that we do this because it's interesting and it's noteworthy more than it is great. We hesitate to recommend it wholeheartedly, but given the fact that we dedicated an entire episode a year ago to the band the Osees, we would be derelict in our duty if we did not cover new music by the Osees. So that said, give it up for Mr. John Dwyer and the Osees' latest record called Intercepted Message. Now, Dwyer is in a little bit of a transitional phase. I mean, he had a streak of about 9 or 10 years where he kind of discovered prog rock and sort of built contours and layers and stylistic features that were very unique, such as two drummers on prog rock, stoner rock anthems was pretty unique, and he built on that all the way through 2020's Protean Threat. Well, in the last few years, he seems to be looking for his next. He's in a transition and he's in a segue. Last year, he came out with a nice, almost charming 22-minute long punk album called Foul Form that really was hardcore punk. It sounds like he made it for about $50 on a Memorex, and so we had that. Now he's the latest person to discover synthesizers and keys. And so now he's in this phase where it's not, you can't call this album prog, you can't call it psychedelic. It's definitely not punk. And thankfully, it's not really the synth pop of the 80s. It's not part of that revivalist movement that, good God, I wish it would end. I mean, make it stop.
I know. It's been going on for more than a decade now, a little bit more.
Japanese Breakfast and Always and all those bands that everybody seems to love except you and me. which why we're the Curmudgeons. We're Statler and Waldorf up in the balcony because damn it, we're right.
I hated fucking that kind of synth pop back in the early 90s. That's why grunge washed it away for a while.
Yeah, although I will say Madonna, I'll give it up to Madonna.
Madonna was good. Because Madonna could write songs.
Yeah, Madonna could definitely write songs. But anyway, the Osees are not doing that on this. It's basically hard rock songs that he uses synthesizers to accentuate and bring to effect. And that would work a lot better if there were like the songs to accompany them. And so that's really the problem with this record. It's basically bash out rock that's driven by synthesizers and that has sort of that sort of looping cars type of synth going on. And so the first half, it's like him finding his footing, and so it's a lot of motif without much diversity or diversifying, and it's almost like Zappa breaks without Zappa songs. and it keeps going that, but then gently and gradually by mid album he seems to find his stride and things get a lot better until the very end when it just sort of melts away into just pure cheesiness with him. But let's just put it this way, Dwyer, he should not try to ever be a crooner. Dwyer is no crooner. And he tries it on the song Always at Night, which is completely abominable. It's right at the end of the record. But before then, there are some highlights. You've got the rumbling title track, Intercepted Message, that has a keyboard loop that resembles a siren, and it also has well-placed hand claps. It's a fun song, really just energetic, almost surf rocky type of song. So that's good. Probably the best song on the record is called Goon. Certainly the most punk thing on the record, and it's Dwyer at his growly best on the choruses. And then another song that I really like, which is a fun little garage nugget called Chaos Heart. And, I said there's some Zappa going on this record, but this is the best indication of Zappa because there's this a little bit of fuzzy and fuzzed out guitar with some sardonically upbeat chimes and keys. It kind of evokes like San Alfonso's era Zappa from the early 70s.
That's not my favorite era of Zappa, to be honest with you.
Yeah, on the Slime. I didn't say it was my favorite. My favorite is before that. Hot Rats and Uncle Meat,
right?
Like the late 60s. But he has that apostrophe overnight sensation, and so I think you can tell that Dwyer reveals that in this album to be somewhat of an influence on these proceedings. But again, it's a cute record. It's got some interesting stuff. He has a few moments of brilliance, but overall the songs just aren't there the way they have been the last decade. Right. All I can say is anybody expecting Toe Cutter Thumbbuster will be greatly, greatly disappointed in this latest Osees volley. Arturo?
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of this band in general. In fact, it was my idea to devote a whole episode to this band last year, like you mentioned already. And that's why it saddens me to say that this is their worst album in over 10 years. With the previous album, the one that you mentioned, Foul Form, it seemed that John Dwyer was doing straight up, straightforward punk rock. And some of it hardcore of the mid to late 1970s variety. With this one, it seems like he's going down the rock and roll history timeline and taking on the late 70s, early 80s synth pop.
Yeah.
The twist on it all is that it's really your vintage traditional OC song structures, revved up verses, revved up guitar solos, or in this case, synth solos as the chorus, repeat again, etc. Just with 1980s synthesizer sounds drenched all over them, except they're not even the cool, gritty synth pop sound of the end of the 70s, beginning of the 80s. It's the cheesy cornball variety of synth pop or of synthesizer sound. Aside from that, it also seems that every 3 or 4 albums, Dwyer and company fall into a rut where their sound is recycled and the band sounds tired. We saw this most recently with 2017's Orc. They bounced back from that with a series of albums in the late teens that explored the heavier, edgier side of progressive rock, i.e. with strong doses of metal and jazz fusion thrown in. So what does that mean for the Osees going forward? Will the next album follow down the rock history timeline and take us to mid-1980s UK indie jangle pop a la the Smiths?
Yeah, I was going to say the Osees are Smiths.
Yeah, Dwyer singing like Morrissey. You know what? That would be an improvement on this turkey of a record.
Chris here again. We usually end our episodes by inviting you to join our Curmudgeonly community page on Facebook. Well, we're picking up our efforts there. Know people just as passionate as us about rock and roll? Invite them to join in the fun. You don't actually need our permission to do so. Also, expect to see a lot more content up there moving forward. Our mission is to engage you, so darn it, we'll engage you like a fire hose, or maybe like a firehouse if we're going to give love to Gene Simmons. We may also be making a few offers. Want to wear a t-shirt featuring our logo? You may have that opportunity soon. So be a fellow curmudgeon, help us expand our little community, and share your own musings via your own posts. We're at facebook.com/groups/curmudgeonrock.
No, and now, the only time you will ever hear yours truly, Curmudgeons, evoke anything that has anything to do with a top 40. Now we have the top 40 songs about New York City. And this will be fun. Basically, the format here is his lightning round. Arturo will introduce the song, give you a couple of sentences, and then I'll have my own thoughts as we go along. This is a fun, really diverse list that'll make you want to go out and immediately put together your own playlist, which by the way, we will probably do for you.
Might as well do all 40 songs.
Yeah, do all 40 songs. Okay, so let's get going. Arturo.
Oh, by the way, before we get going, it's top 40 rock songs about or taking place in New York.
Yeah, expand a little bit on why you stayed away. Well, obviously we know why we stayed away from hip hop, But I'll say this.
It's too much. Like I said it in the parameter setter. If we do great hip hop songs about or taking place in New York, that would be like 300 songs taking 5 episodes.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, we'd have an entire series that would last us like 3 months.
Yeah, and also no jazz or Broadway musical. Jazz, again, too many. Let's focus on rock, and I fucking hate Broadway musicals, so fuck that.
Yeah, well, I was going to say, you still haven't caught on to Hamilton, which is one of my favorite albums of the 2000s. So once you catch on to that, your opinion may change. But be that as it may, what's number 40?
Number 40 is Sting with Englishman in New York from 1988. The single came out in 88. The album that the song is on came out the year before, 1987. I'm not a huge fan of solo Sting, but this moderate hit from the late 1980s is a soft rock, jazz pop number that rather breezily and effortlessly captures and evokes the feeling of how lonely and isolating New York City can be, which is a cruel irony considering how many millions of people live in the city. This feeling of otherness is amplified when you do a little research and find out that Sting isn't singing about himself here, but rather from the point of view of a good friend of his at the time, the openly gay English writer Quentin Crisp, who had moved to an apartment in the Lower East Side section of the Bowery shortly before this song came out. Chris?
Be yourself, no matter what they say, is a lyric from this song. Yeah. And really that kind of captures the spirit of being a non-native New Yorker figuring out what the hell the city is about.
Right.
And it's a sentiment that's so universal. I mean, you could fill in and call this song, I'm a Duluth native in New York, or, I'm a Schenectady guy in New York.
I'm a Syracuse guy in New York, like you were.
Yeah, exactly. Or a Miami guy in New York, like you were.
Yeah.
I mean, that's essentially how it is. It's just there's a universality of that experience of being different and non-native, and it's the best. I still think it's the best and fastest moving city in the world, and really, jazz, I would say, is an inspired touch for such a song. I mean, there's a point of mood that comes along with realizing that there is that learning curve of being alone in the city. So good stuff.
Yeah. Speaking of Englishmen in New York, number 39, John Lennon with his song New York City from 1972. In 1969, the Beatles put out a funky little acoustic boogie of a single called The Ballad of John and Yoko, which was a sizable hit that summer. Lyrically, the song is a travelogue about all the events surrounding Lennon's wedding with Yoko Ono, getting married in Gibraltar, having a honeymoon in Paris, doing their bed-in, promoting peace in Amsterdam, etc. Well, Lennon took that same approach on this song, detailing the events surrounding his and Yoko's move to New York in early 1972, meeting political activist Jerry Rubin, meeting a New York City cop, playing at Max's Kansas City in Midtown with his new band Elephant's Memory, riding the Staten Island Ferry, visiting the Fillmore, visiting the Apollo, cycling in Greenwich Village. Lennon vividly portrays the funky, far-out bohemian panacea that we all imagine early 70s New York to have been, and it's a kick-ass 1950s style rocker too, off his very underrated Sometime in New York album. Chris?
Yeah, well, I don't think it's that underrated. I mean, this is the highlight of an otherwise mediocre record, and it's nihilistic rock at its best. In music, it's a tribute to Chuck Berry, Chuck Berry influenced. And like you said, it's really an ode to the freaks and the geeks of the city, and it's I think it's that thrill, that initial thrill of going there and finding all of those things that you mentioned that he talks about in those songs, and he makes it clear that it's a personal journey to settling into the city, and so it's really kind of a neat given that Lennon is such a strong character in the history of rock and roll. Kind of him being autobiographical that way, it's kind of fun to kind of go along with him on that. Definitely ode to the freaks and geeks. Number 38.
Speaking of the freaks and geeks, they come out to play in the next song. Number 38, Tom Waits and his song Union Square from 1985. This is the first of 2 Tom Waits songs on this list, both off of his masterpiece album, Rain Dogs. This is a whirling dervish of a song that depicts a seedy scene of gay prostitutes and drag queens hanging out in Union Square looking to pick up tricks. Even off-duty cops get involved in the action, as this is a bluesy stomper of good old-fashioned rock and roll that feels as gritty as its subject matter. Chris?
Yeah, my favorite song on Union Square, or excuse me, on Rain Dogs.
Rain Dogs,
yeah, it's my favorite song off Rain Dogs, and it's like I said, it's just rollicking. It just has that, like you said, it's got that blues rock thing. It's almost Tom Waits in the middle of his Bertolt Brecht phase decides that he's going to be a band, just be a punk band leader here for a song. And I always love, that one little earworm that's always stuck in my head, half Puerto Rican Chinese. It's just kind of a fun image. So good stuff. And it makes me miss Union Square. Union Square I used to love. There was a Barnes and Noble.
Great to hang out in.
Yeah, there was a Barnes and Noble right there that I used to spend lots of time in. And Saturdays was always fun because that was the market out there. And I lived with a photographer's roommate of mine who was an Irish photographer who used to stake out a spot every Saturday at 4 a.m. He would stake out a spot just so he could get prime position to go sell his stuff. So
I bought weed there a few times too.
I'm sure you did. What parts of Manhattan did you not buy weed in during that streak? Yeah.
Well, speaking of these people, I don't think these guys ever smoked pot. But anyway,
No.
Number 37, Vampire Weekend with the song Hudson from the year 2013. If someone were to ask who is the definitive New York City rock band of the early 20th century, the answer would probably be either The Strokes, Vampire Weekend, or LCD Sound System. All 3 of these bands are represented on this list. And this song is off of Vampire Weekend's excellent album, Modern Vampires of the City. It's a lyrically impressionistic track about how New York City has this alluring ability to make people want to change their identities and reinvent themselves.
Oh, yeah.
With its lyrical references to the Hudson River, Riverside, and Sutton Place, main vampire Ezra Koenig paints a picture as stark and as gray as the album cover. The eerie electro-indie arrangement adds to the song's creepy ambiance. Chris?
Yeah, I like the fact that it's both ethereal and mechanical all at once.
Yeah.
And I think that's a good way of capturing New York, especially the neighborhoods that he's talking about there, the sort of the upper part of it. If you've ever been in there, I remember one time, because I lived in West Harlem for a while, which is just north of there. And
I bought weed there too.
I'm sure you did. Probably when you were visiting me. And walking around at 6 a.m. in the morning where you get a morning fog in that area, there is a certain spookiness to that neighborhood. And I think that at least musically, this song kind of captures that feel and that aesthetic. So good stuff.
Yeah, definitely.
36.
Number 36. This is an old one. Fred Neil with the song Bleecker and McDougal from 1965.
Yep.
Fred Neil was one of the mainstays of New York City's Greenwich Village folk scene in the early 1960s, the same scene that gave us Ramblin' Jack Elliott, The Lovin' Spoonful, and, of course, a young Bob Dylan. Neil's most known songs were made famous by other singers, most notably Harry Nilsson, with Everybody's Talkin', made famous in the 1969 movie Midnight Cowboy, and Tim Buckley with his lovely rendition of Dolphins from 1973. This song, mentioning 2 of the main streets down in the NYU part of the village, where I lived for a little while, has a surprisingly common theme among New York songs, and that's of wanting to actually leave the city.
Yep.
Fred Neil rambles on about standing on a lonely village street corner, longing to be with his woman in Coconut Grove, which I presume is Coconut Grove in Miami.
Yeah.
It's a rollicking folk rock number with the Lovin' Spoonful's John Sebastian on harmonica. Chris?
Yeah, I did not know that about John Sebastian, but it kind of figures because those guys were buddies. I just find it kind of funny. Well, one, the album cover. You look at the album cover and you're like, hey, that is Bleecker and McDougal. Holy shit. Because it's a pretty distinct looking corner down there. And but it is kind of funny that he has the song about being on Bleecker and McDougal, wishing he was in, of all fucking places, Coconut Grove. It's not about the place, it's about the girl. So let's make that clear. And you said it, there is a theme there. There's this there's this longing for the transcendence of somewhere else. You get caught up in the day-to-day rather than the whimsical. And that's a common experience from being there. There's just days where living in New York just sucked, but then there were other days where I was like, you know what, there's no place I'd rather live. It's a great place to be when you're in your mid-20s.
Right.
Sure.
Oh, totally. Number 35, Don Henley with New York Minute from 1989. As our listeners would know, this is a very Eagles-friendly podcast. However, I've never been enamored by Don Henley's solo catalog except for a handful of songs. Nevertheless, it would seem a bit ignorant to leave off this mellow slice of, let's call it, yacht rock balladry with all its lyrical references to Wall Street, subway stations, walking through Central Park, and of course, the ever popular phrase, a New York Minute. Chris, why do you like this song so much?
Well, one, I think it's like just about the most Eagle-ish song in Don Henley's entire solo catalog, which, no surprise, it became a staple of Eagles songs once they got back together in the 90s.
Right.
Kind of their shows that fit right in. It was built for Timothy B. Schmidt's high harmony vocals.
In a New York Minute. Ooh.
Yeah, here comes Timothy B. Schmidt. He's all about the ooh. But he makes the point that a New York Minute does move more slowly than your average minute, that there is a drama and a story to be had there. Everything can change and get a little strange, but not necessarily in the blink of an eye. And I think that Henley really captures that on this song. I didn't realize it was from 1989. I thought it was. I didn't realize it was on The End of the Innocents. It sounds like it would have been earlier. So kind of shows you, he was kind of. Yeah, Don Henley is an anachronism. He was stuck in 1984 and 1989. Go figure.
Number 34, The Strokes with their song New York City Cops from 2001. This is an interesting one. This song, off of their classic debut album, Is This It?, isn't really about New York, and you can only assume it takes place in New York because, well, it is The Strokes. It's about a one-night stand that hits a little too hard, so hard that it makes frontman Julian Casablancas want to, you guessed it, leave this town. The infamous chorus of New York City Cops, they ain't too smart. It just seems like an irreverent, off-the-cuff joke. Nevertheless, it rocks with the bouncy new wave pop thrill that the Strokes' early records were famous for. Chris?
Yeah, the song is more about a conversation with a woman that he's thinking about breaking up with, or like you said, taking off from town. And so it's almost like a conversational thing, almost like they're hearing a couple of cops on the street. And he's just like sort of, oh yeah, random thought. It's very ADHD in that way. One thing to note, by the way, is that because Is This It came out a little bit after 9/11. Or around the same time as 9/11, they had to remove this song from Is This It? And I can't remember exactly what replaced it, but I know that my version of the album, the one I bought on CD, had this. So either it was a European version that I bought from Other Music, or it actually was a version of Is This It? That, like, a very early version before they were able to make the switch. So, I felt so cool because of that.
Did you have the version that had the hand on the woman's backside?
I did.
Yes,
I did.
Okay.
I did not have the more anodyne, cleaned up cover. I didn't have the orange and blue. I had the butt.
All right, cool. All right, number 33, Steely Dan with Daddy Don't Live in That New York City No More from 1975. Now, Steely Dan are known as a quintessential Los Angeles band, but in fact, the main men of the Dan, Donald Fagen and Walter Becker, grew up in New York. It's odd that they rarely wrote songs about their hometown, but one of those rarities showed up as one of the standout tracks off the album Katie Lied. Amidst a background of sleazy blues funk, Fagen sings in the voice of a character who's a small town hood and gangster doing menial schlep work and yearns, again, to get out of New York, but knows he never can. Chris?
Yeah, there's a couple of great lyrics in on this record or on this song. He don't celebrate Sunday on a Saturday night no more. That's a great drinking line. And then the line about drinking his dinner from a paper sack. And which suggests that the protagonist of the song is a real sad sack. There's not a whole lot of joy going on here, even though it's a fun song. It's a fun little blues song. I always love the little lick, the guitar lick on it. It's fun, and great vocal by Donald Fagen. Kind of almost like a woozy echo to it. So good stuff.
Yeah. Number 32. Aretha Franklin with her version of Spanish Harlem from 1971. By the way, another place where I bought weed. This is a song that Jerry Lieber and Mike Stoller wrote for the soul singer Ben E. King back in 1960. It wasn't the big hit King expected it to be. That would come the next year with Stand By Me. But it became a huge hit for Aretha Franklin when she put out her version in 1971. With New York City Spanish Harlem, basically East Harlem from East 96th Street to East 135th Street, as the romantic background for a man finally finding the woman he loves. Aretha's version is as vibrant, funky, and upbeat as they come. Chris?
Yeah, the song is basically a spiritual cousin to Rocksteady. Yeah, probably from the same session. It just has it's a faster tempo than Benny King's version. Actually, it blows Benny King's version away. Faster tempo, and it's got that skittering percussion and punchy organ. It's just, Aretha is a soul sister singer number one. Really, really, really great. And again, just taking a Lieber Stoller song that's pretty cheesy. Basically in Benny King's hands, it is a show tune. In Aretha's hands, it's an R&B song. More power to the queen.
Again, fuck show tunes. Number 31, the Avett Brothers with I and Love and You from 2009. Now, I've never been a fan of this folk rock group, but even I'll admit this unabashedly sentimental piano ballad is pretty moving. You won't find many songs that gush about the healing properties of just being in Brooklyn. I prefer Queens myself, but hey, to each their own. Chris?
Yeah, it definitely is an ode to, a lot of people move to New York to get away from what they're doing. It's a really great place because of the anonymity. You can go to New York and find yourself. You can lose yourself and find yourself. And so it's, renewal from a tragic condition. And what a hook. I always love that Brooklyn, Take Me In. Tremendous hook. It's just very sing-songy, and it's just a very engaging song. And it's one of those things that I'm with you, Art. I'm much more of a Queens guy than a Brooklyn guy, but for the Brooklyn people, it was like it was a national anthem for a year or two there when it came out. I was in law school. I think it's like 2009 or something like that. Another really good song. All
right, good. Again, number 30, Vampire Weekend again, with their song A-Punk from 2008, A-Punk. Vampire Weekend are back on this list, this time with one of their most famous songs off their self-titled debut album. The Hudson River is name-checked again, as is the Sloan Kettering Cancer Hospital in Manhattan and Washington Heights. I also bought weed there as well, which is where the main character, Johanna, moves to after she breaks up with the narrator of the song. Musically, it has all the hallmarks of the band's then patented spiky, bouncy take on the kind of South African pop that Paul Simon brought to the mainstream in the 1980s. Chris?
Yeah, this definitely proves that Paul Simon was an influence, but this song is also Baroque as fuck.
Yeah.
It's just really, it's one of my favorite songs of the entire 2000s. I think it belongs on the short list of the best songs on it.
Right.
It's
Right.
just, it just has this kick-ass little jam to it. It's just a funky rhythm,
Right.
but also it's weird because it manages to evoke Paul Simon and like the Ramones
Yeah.
simultaneously. It's
Yeah.
so,
Yeah.
yeah, kind of a neat feat. And yes, folks, it is more than just the opening credits song to the movie Step Brothers.
Yeah. I didn't know that. Okay. All right. Number 29, XTC with Statue of Liberty from 1978. Speaking of bouncy and spiky, in the late 1970s, just when punk rock was raging, Swindon, England's XTC introduced an original brand of angular, quirky, new wave pop that had never been heard before. They were lyrically literate and very, very cutting, with a sardonic wit and humor that they would cultivate throughout the rest of their career. It's especially evident in this track off their debut album, White Noise, in which singer-lyricist Andy Partridge fawns over and dreams of making love to New York City's iconic Statue of Liberty. Far from contrived sexual perversion, I've always interpreted this song as a sly commentary on the commercial exploitation of national monuments. Chris?
Yeah, in some ways you're right about that. But hey, who knew the old statue could trigger such a kinky fantasy about her? I love the whole imagery of being impaled on her hair. That just I think he's just having some fun. But yeah, I hadn't thought about that in terms of the perversion of the monuments and the sort of the taking things like the Statue of Liberty or even over in their native England, Big Ben or anything like that.
Right.
But that's an interesting point. But still, I just take it as a cheeky sexual fantasy, sardonic wit type of song.
Right. All right. Well, speaking of kinky, you get a little bit of this in the next song. Number 28, Genesis with The Lamb Lies Down on Broadway from 1974. This is the title track from the last album Peter Gabriel did with Genesis before drummer Phil Collins took over vocal and frontman duties. It's a concept album and coming-of-age story about a young Puerto Rican boy named Rael. There are no Puerto Ricans named Rael, but anyway, Rael, who arrives in New York City, who goes through all kinds of bizarre and life-changing adventures. There are many New York songs about being an outsider plopped in the middle of the depraved madness of the city, and this song follows in that tradition. Personally, I've never been a fan of this album and still believe everything this indulgent double album wants to express is already expressed in just this one song. Chris?
Yeah, basically it's this. If you don't need to hear the album, folks, just seek out this song, and that's all you need because it really, the song is the album. In terms of thematically, they kind of beat it to death. It's like, oh, you're in the middle of Times Square and you don't belong. Oh, okay. But there's a fitting energy and look, I think Genesis, it's the butt of many jokes, but in some ways it's undeserved. I think that their stuff certainly was adventurous, and obviously they had a streak there when it was just the trio with Phil Collins, Rutherford, then and Banks. When they had that version that was actually really good for a while. So Genesis does deserve its props. I think I do like this song. It's got a panache to it, and it's got an inherent drama to it. But it also kind of proves that Phil Collins could drum.
He was a great drummer.
Really great rhythmic stuff going on here. But Rael, you sure you didn't mean Raphael there, dude?
Peter Gabriel, he has never met, at that point he had probably never met a Latino person. Anyway, number 27, Lou Reed with Dirty Boulevard from 1989. If someone asked you who the definitive quintessential New York City rock star was, and your answer was or is anyone other than Lou Reed, you would be wrong.
Yes.
Old Lou takes the cake here with 3 songs on this list. This one is from his 1989 album, New York. The entire album is a song cycle that takes place in the city, and it's one of his best solo albums. However, this track is one of, if not the most powerful song on the whole thing. It's a meditation on the poverty that many immigrant families in the city face. And it's a story told through the eyes of a young boy named Pedro, who dreams of flying away amidst a backdrop of children selling plastic roses for $1, prostitutes offering themselves to cops, and a father who beats him with a coat hanger. For a man who was notoriously apolitical in the 1970s, middle-aged Lou ended up being quite the sympathetic, bleeding heart liberal. Chris?
Yeah, he did, and yeah, you're right. There is sort of a somberness to this album, where it's the transcendence that one would seek, and the dream is like 20 blocks away, because it does make references to the bright lights of the city. But here he's stuck in the darkness and the dirt, obviously the dirty boulevard. And it's one of those things that, you know, there might be the bright lights, but there's plenty of darkness. So it's a perfect encapsulation of the New York working class and lower middle class or poverty class attitude and condition. So really great. And I love the riff. It's a really great structured song. And I don't know, like I said, Lou Reed in the late 80s, early 90s, he had kind of a revival. Like this stuff, he had like 2 or 3 records in that period that were all very, very strong, New York being the best of them.
Right. Number 26, Billy Joel with Moving Out, parentheses, Anthony's song from 1977. This comes off of Billy Joel, Long Island native Billy Joel's massive 1977 album, The Stranger. And it's another in that underrated tradition of New York songs where people just want to get the hell out. Ranking just below Lou Reed in the tier of quintessential New York City rock stars, whenever Billy Joel is talking about getting or doing something in the city, there's no doubt he's talking about New York. The references to getting a house in Hackensack, New Jersey, and Sergeant O'Leary working as a bartender at Mr. Cacciatore's bar down on Sullivan Street are all you need. It's also an insanely catchy piece of pop rock that's as purely New York as a hot dog with relish bought from a Lebanese-owned hot dog stand on the corner of 42nd and Broadway, which I have done many times. Chris?
Yes, and I have done many times. Although you're kind of bastardizing things there. Nathan's, man, Nathan's. You know, that's the only hot dog you need. Nathan's out in Coney Island, the original. But anyway, it can't really be a coincidence that you have this song right in front of Dirty Boulevard, can it? I mean, they're kind of cut from the same cloth. It's kind of, boy, does this city suck to live in when you have no money. I mean, that's sort of the connective tissue. But you know, I've always loved the bridge on this song with the piano, and there's that. I've always loved the saxophone and the use of that. Liberty DeVito is a very underrated drummer. And so really good stuff. So just a really great, like you said, it's a great pop rock song. It's earworm after earworm after earworm on the song. So yes. Yeah. And arguably should be higher on this list, actually, because it's, you know, because remember, we did put together this list from our perspective of having lived there. Yeah. And, you know, and so there were some tough calls. And so it ends up at 26. But in terms of the experientialness of living in New York, there's very few songs that are better than that one, than this one.
I agree. Number 25, Bruce Springsteen. You knew he was coming with The Rising from 2002. Now, both yours truly, Curmudgeons, were living as roommates in New York during the time of 9/11, and you can count this curmudgeon as someone who never fell for the wave of maudlin sentimentality that washed over not just the city in the aftermath of the tragedy, but a lot of immediate post-9/11 music as well. This song, the title track to Springsteen's album of 2002, also called The Rising, was a big part of that. What's the song about? Well, exactly what the title says. The rising of New York City's, and by extension, the country's morale after what happened. Not much in the way of subtlety in this song, but then again, it isn't supposed to be subtle. In later years, even I've come to acknowledge that it's a pretty moving song. Chris?
Yeah, it's an extraordinarily moving song. It's there are times when even thinking about this song chokes me up, because it's not just about, rising and coming back again, and it's not this, we will survive kind of song. It's actually, there's a religiosity to it that is really surprising and incredibly moving. This idea of, yes, he has imagery of, sort of, the burning sky and the hole that's left, and the folks that are now gone. And so there is this rising of wanting to move on and do those things. But it really is equivalent of talking about these folks becoming angels rising up to heaven. And there's a universality to that as well. And it's just incredibly moving. It's just wonderful lyrics, and one of the best chorus hooks that Springsteen ever had, and almost anybody's ever had. That na 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 na.
Yeah.
I mean, it really is. It's anthemic. It's transcendent, and again, just incredibly moving. And just the Virgin Mary does show up in the song, and it's just, wow, just wonderful stuff. That's all I can say. It's just incredibly moving song.
Number 24, the Ramones with 53rd and 3rd from 1976. In the annals of songs in the annals of history that take place in New York City, you probably won't find one as unsettling and disturbing as this song, taken from the Ramones' seminal self-titled debut album. The lyrics were written by bassist Dee Dee Ramone, inspired by his early days working as a male prostitute back when he was young. It tells the story of a Vietnam veteran who resorts to turning tricks on, yes, the corner of 53rd Street and 3rd Avenue, a popular gay prostitution pickup place at the time, because he presumably can't find work. He gets picked up but kills the customer with a razor blade and takes the cash, and the cops are now after him. But at least, quote, I proved that I'm no sissy, end quote. This is the kind of gritty New York song that makes you want to take a hot shower to get the grime off after listening. Chris?
Yeah, and see, the funny part is if you go like a block over to 53rd and Lexington, now all of a sudden it's kind of swanky. Yeah, that Lexington and 3rd is kind of the point where Midtown becomes the East Side, and so Lexington and Park and that's kind of where all the stuff is, and the high rises and the cool bars and the gentry. But once you start getting to 3rd, then it gets a little more nondescript and a little scuzzier, and a little, like you said, things kind of go on the underground. It's even more so when you get to 2nd and 1st, but it starts at 3rd. So I did not know that about Dee Dee Ramone, that he did some male prostitution. But if there's any spot where you can get away with it in the city, it would be that one of those spots there, like Midtown East, which again is so nondescript that nobody gives a shit. Nobody cares.
Yeah, definitely.
And so that's a definite advantage. If you're going to be there. Go ahead.
Speaking of nobody caring, this next song tackles that. Number 23, James Brown, the Godfather, with Down and Out in New York City from 1973. This song is a single off the soundtrack album James Brown did for the underrated and I think quite excellent blaxploitation film Black Caesar.
Oh yeah.
This is another slice of the Big Apple that dwells on the dark side of, quote unquote, the hustle, of the poverty and desperation that comes from being on the bottom rung of society's ladder and feeling you can never rise above your station. The song is told from the point of view of a shoeshine boy in Harlem, 125th Street and 8th Avenue to be exact, as Brown mentions in the lyric, who is resigned to his fate, Musically, it's one of Brown's most bombastic, moving, and cinematically epic songs. Awesome horn arrangement. Chris?
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Awesome horn arrangement. This one of those songs that shows how much influence Fred Wesley, who was the trombonist in the horn section, had. He was Brown's musical director and arranged a lot of the songs from this period. So just really, really rousing horns. You know, they're just sort of in your face. The other thing about this song too is it's kind of a demarcation line for Brown. That Brown between 1967 and the first part of 1973 was really enamored of the one and the funk, but not necessarily of the song in the traditional sense. A lot of great songs he released, you know, some classic recordings. We just covered that a few months back, but this is where he starts to get more sort of verse, chorus, verse again. And this is one of the best instances of that from this period. Yeah, and you're right. It does have a cinematic, and it tells a story. And I don't think Brown actually wrote it. I think he either
he did not write it.
He did not write it, but boy did he capture it. It's one of those things. Man, it doesn't belong to whoever wrote it now, for sure. You know, James Brown stole that song. You know, and one last comment about it: grandeur personified.
Totally, absolutely. All right, now. Fast forward to the far future, number 22, St. Vincent with the song New York from 2017. This electric piano ballad is one of the most moving songs on St. Vincent's 2017 album, Mass Seduction, an album that was ostensibly about being unsettled by fame and a toxic drug-fueled relationship. St. Vincent, real name Annie Clark, lived in New York for quite a while before she made it big in music. But on this track, she painfully mourns the loss of a friendship. It's usually romantic relationships that get the enveloped by New York treatment. So it's nice to hear platonic friendship being given the New York song treatment. References to First Avenue, 8th Avenue, and Astor Place firmly put the listener in mid-noughties New York, which is where Annie Clark lived before she became St. Vincent. Chris?
Yeah, when she makes reference to the old Astor crew, that's breaking up, and there's only a few of us left. I think all of us have been there in our lives, especially in our 20s, where the party is starting to end and folks are starting to disappear into success. And you know, there's not a whole lot left to hold on to. And so when you're losing those friendships for whatever reason, you know, you just kind of age out of things. You know, people you know, they start to verge, or they start to diverge. And so, you know, like you said, there's a mourning and a longing in this song that's actually really lovely. It's profane, you know, talking about the only motherfucker in the city who can handle me. But it's just a beautiful, sentimental song about loss.
And did I mention that I also bought weed in Astor Place as well?
I'm sure you did. That would have been a good place to buy
it. Number 21. Tom Waits with Downtown Train, again, 1985. The second Waits song from Rain Dogs on this list. Rod Stewart had a massive worldwide hit with his version of it in 1989. But while Stewart's version has the bombast and the sentiment, Waits' original has the deeper emotion. The Downtown Train is clearly part of the New York City subway system, as Waits mentions all the Brooklyn girls trying to break out of their little worlds. The lights and the streets of the city are the backdrop for this lush, poetic tale of unrequited love that hints at just a little bit of stalkerism with the verse, within the verse, with the narrator mentioning how much he knows his paramour's window, stairs, and doorway. Moving, romantic, and just a bit creepy, just like New York City itself.
Yeah, you know, you can't have a New York love song without a little bit of that creepiness or a little bit of that bizarre, you know, sort of edge to it. Can you?
Right.
I like the guitar in this song. It's surprisingly strong little guitar song with, you know, good licks. And, you know, Waits, you know, there was sometimes, you know, he had that weird gruff voice of his, but there's sometimes when he crooned in that style, that it actually had emotional resonance
Yeah.
to it. And Rod Stewart, yeah, fine. It's a smoother arrangement. It's more radio friendly, and Rod Stewart could sing anything, but
Right.
and he pretties up the song. I actually kind of like the Rod Stewart version, but it's pretty.
Yeah.
In that Rod Stewart kind of pretty humble pie-ish type voice.
Right.
But
Right.
Waits doing it in Waits of Style adds, like you said, a particular emotionalness to it, or basically makes it more honest. It's an honest creepy love song.
Right. And by the way, Chris, it's the Faces, not Humble Pie, that Rod
No,
Stewart.
no, I understand that. I understand.
Oh, okay.
Faces / humble pie. I kind of put them in the same.
On this episode, we gave you the top 40 rock songs about or taking place in New York City. For the next episode, we're going to continue our second Golden Age of Rock series as we move on to the seminal year of 1965. Rock is exploding in all directions. Bob Dylan goes electric and instantly becomes an icon for the ages. The Byrds bring on folk rock. The Rolling Stones bring on edgy blues rock. The Who bring on proto-punk. Motown puts out some of the label's best singles. James Brown starts to lay down the foundation for funk. And gritty, punky garage rock bands start to spread throughout the US and the UK. And, more importantly, the Beatles take all the revolutionary musical change going on around them and use it as the basis for an evolution of musical style, sophistication, and artistry never before heard or seen. Join us next time as the Curmudgeon Rock Report brings you the second Golden Age of Rock. 1965, a story in 7 acts.
Number 20.
Le Tigre, or the way you say it in French, Le Tigre, with My Metro Card from 1999. Finally, we get a lighthearted New York City song. In the late 1990s, after the legendary feminist punk band Bikini Kill broke up, frontwoman Kathleen Hanna left Olympia, Washington, and settled in New York to form the electronic funk and punk outfit Le Tigre. Coming off their brilliant self-titled debut album, My Metro Card is a glorious slice of technicolor indie dance pop that extols the virtues of having a Metro card that allows you to endlessly ride all 36 lines of New York City's subway system. Indeed, as Hannah sings in the chorus, think I'll go a little, but then I go far. And even Rudy Giuliani, who was the mayor of New York at the time, gets a shout out. Oh, fuck Giuliani, he's such a fucking jerk. With what we now know about the man, it seems Hannah was prescient. Chris?
Yes, she was. And I love this song because a Metro card, it really is a status symbol. I'm cool because I live in New York and I get to have a Metro card that I can ride anywhere at any time. Strange but true. When we first moved to the city, you remember what the price of a Metro card was?
No, what? I forgot.
$63.
Jeez, what is it now? Over 100?
132. As of it just went up $5 last month. And so it's more than double from when we first moved there. So I will, say what you want about Mayor Bloomberg, because that's when the transit prices went way up. Say what you want about him, but he at least was smart enough to know, hey, you've got a captive audience. We need revenue. People can't live without their My Metro card. So let's my
make them pay for it.
Jack them up, for sure. So number 19.
Number 19, Bill Withers and his song Harlem from 1971, taken from his debut album Just As I Am. Harlem is a vivid and detailed picture of life in Harlem in the early 1970s. Being poor in the summer with no air conditioning, being poor in the winter with no heating, Saturday night parties that are out of control, Sunday morning church gatherings where the faithful are crossing paths with the heathens just coming home from partying. In Withers' eyes, Harlem is at the crossroads of everything bad and good about the center of New York City's African-American Mecca. Chris?
Yeah, really evocative imagery in the song. And Withers could just sing anything.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
like you could give Withers Mary Had a Little Lamb,
Yeah.
and he would make it into like the most soulful, most wistful
Yeah.
thing imaginable. He just had that kind of voice, and
Yeah.
just really incredible range. And I mean, I love the fact that it's basically an acoustic folk song in some ways. It's got some it's obviously R&B, but it's got some folk qualities, and Withers wraps around it just beautifully. And yeah, the description of Harlem, that is a perfect distillation of like 7 a.m. You've got some folks that have been in the all night bar that are coming home. You stay at the bar until 6 a.m. and then you drunkenly go over and eat eggs at the at the diner next door.
Yeah.
And so you have those folks crossing the old church ladies that are getting ready for first service. That is a perfect New York image. So great song.
Speaking of imagery, the next song has it and then some. Number 18, U2 with Angel of Harlem from 1988. When U2 put out their half live, half studio double album, Rattle and Hum, just 1 year after the blockbuster success of 1987's The Joshua Tree, it received a lot of blowback and negative criticism for its, bloated and indulgent nature and its self-important posturing. Now, while the criticism wasn't completely unfounded, if you go back and listen carefully to the album with fresh ears, you will find more than a handful of outstanding tracks, some of them among the best the band ever did. One of them was this single, a soaring R&B soul anthem that packs in as many New York City references as possible in one song. JFK Airport, the Birdland Jazz Club on 53rd Street, and the irresistible hook of the title in the chorus all blend together in Bono's expressionistic tapestry and ode to, again, the Mecca of America's African-American experience, while specifically a tribute to legendary jazz singer Billie Holiday, who made her name in New York. The passion behind the performance belies what could easily be interpreted as a love letter to the heart of New York City itself. Chris?
Yeah, and a song that showed that U2 was capable of adding a really great horn arrangement to one of their songs. Yeah, and they didn't do it much, and this is like one of the least intrusive performances by The Edge. The Edge doesn't define this song. It's the rhythm, it's the horns, and it's a riff song. It's a rhythm song. It's an R&B song, and and it really is a great ode to Billie Holiday as well. And it was one of their, but it was like you said, that song, that album is maligned because again, it has the live songs, which are kind of like a monument to itself, or the band is making a monument to itself. But the studio stuff is pretty underrated, and I think that they do hit some poignancy notes within it. I mean, I've never been a huge fan of the B.B. King song there, When Love Comes to Town. But other than that, I mean, you've got some really strong stuff. This being probably one of the 2 or 3 best songs on the album. Awesome stuff.
Number 17, the band Phosphorescent with The Mermaid Parade from 2010. The indie folk band Phosphorescent delved full bore into country rock on their 2010 masterpiece album, Here's to Taking It Easy. And it's one of the greatest albums to ever come out from that much maligned subgenre, in my opinion. This particular waltz time ballad, while certainly not alone among the legions of songs about being in New York while missing your sweetheart, is certainly one of the most beautifully and lovingly rendered songs ever recorded in that tradition. Frontman and songwriter Matthew Hoke virtually cries tears of romantic despair from his eyes as he describes the pageantry of the country's largest art parade being held, that is held every year in Coney Island. Chris?
Yeah, it's kind of a neat and poignant juxtaposition where he's longing for his woman on another beach all the way across the nation, while being on this beach in Coney Island at the Mermaid Parade. It's really just kind of it's like a freak among the masses, and really strong ode to loneliness. It's amazing to me that Matthew Hoke and this band didn't become bigger than they did, because they had all country sensibilities that a lot of others in the genre didn't embody nearly as well. They really did have that plaintiveness to what they were doing, and they could really capture the emotion and the pathos behind the lyrics. And so there was always a nice matchup between lyrics and musical accompaniment. It's almost like they arranged to the lyrics, and which made songs like this particularly very sweet.
Yeah. Number 16, Joni Mitchell with Chelsea Morning from 1969. Back in the 1960s, the Chelsea district of New York, for those who don't know, west of 6th Avenue between 14th Street and the upper 20s, was known as a wild, woolly, and downright gritty part of the city. Edgy, artsy, decadent, and gay-friendly, the district got an even worse reputation among the conservative crowd after Andy Warhol's controversial and exploitive art house film Chelsea Girls in 1966. Well, that's exactly the movie Joni Mitchell name checks in a rather negative way in this song, and then goes on to describe how she beautifies a drab and dreary hotel room in a then seedy Manhattan hotel. On a deeper level, it's a rather optimistic and philosophical ode to making something beautiful out of something so ugly. Chris?
Yeah, exactly. And so it has a lot of these songs, if they're not about transcendence, they touch on transcendence, and I think this is one of those. It's the song I think of first when I think of Joni Mitchell. It's a happy sounding song. It's an upbeat song, and it's almost defiantly positive. Like you just said. It's funny. Chelsea, just a quick story. Maybe this is a non sequitur, but I remember when I used to work in Chelsea for a while. Company that I worked for, they had the infinite non-wisdom of moving offices to 26th and 12th into an old warehouse, which is more than a mile from the nearest subway. And so, and I would get out early. It was a job that I worked like 7 to 3. And so I could make appointments. Well, one time I needed some orthotics made for my feet. So I made an appointment for a podiatrist in Chelsea, which, as you said, is like one of the gayest neighborhoods in the world. And I go into the podiatrist's office, and I go to sit in the chair, and I start looking around me. Well, first off, he's playing like that sort of that house techno, that gay techno.
Yeah.
And I look around, and it's like nothing but like male bikini calendars and posters. and so this guy knew. It became pretty clear that he knew what audience he was catering to, or like what his main clientele was. And I just thought it was funny. I was just like, okay, I have officially hit the gay podiatrist's office in Chelsea. So the reputation, it's not exactly off base.
By the way, Judy Collins, the folk singer, she had a hit with this song before Joni put out her version. Joni wrote it, Judy Collins had a hit, and then Joni put it on her record.
Yeah, and the Judy Collins version really isn't all that bad either. I mean,
it's a really good song.
No, it's a
great song.
It's number 16. Yeah, it's number
16. Exactly.
And speaking of Chelsea, let's move on to number 15. Not a coincidence.
This one's definitely not a coincidence. Number 15, Leonard Cohen with Chelsea Hotel number 2 from 1974. From one Chelsea Hotel song to another. In this one, everyone's favorite horny Buddhist recounts a sexual tryst, supposedly with Janis Joplin, and even explicitly describes the setting for a blowjob. While in almost any other inferior songwriter's hands, this subject matter would come across as lewd and tawdry. Just listen to Kiss's Room Service from the same era. with Leonard Cohen, there's an unshakable melancholy and a rumination on an era of wild and crazy behavior without consideration of the consequences. Chris?
Yeah, we just made podcast history as probably the only one that's ever contrasted Chelsea Hotel Number 2 with room service. Wow, that's actually a pretty good call in terms of analytical framework. Yeah, this song manages to be dreamlike and gorgeous, even though, like you said, the subject matter is somewhat scandalous. I've always loved the lyric where when he's quoting her as saying, "I prefer handsome men, but for you, I'll make an exception."
Yeah.
uh, as being I consider myself a fairly handsome guy, but I'm also 5'4", which has its limitations. So I always like to think that my wife's making an exception for me too. Oh shucks.
All right, number 14, the band Interpol and their song NYC from 2002. Now, chalk this one up to an old saying that an old British friend of mine introduced me to. The sun shines on a dog's ass every now and then. Interpol were part of that wave of indie hipster New York bands of the early 2000s, early noughties, that got absurd amounts of hype from music critics, especially in New York. Interpol was also easily one of the worst of those bands, with their bland, forgettable, joyless, hookless brand of insipid cookie cutter post-punk. But hey, this song is truly amazing. It's the only song where they ever convincingly escaped their Joy Division fixation and managed to, with its swelling and widescreen epic guitar sound like Mogwai and Radiohead condensed into a shimmering, yearning pop nugget. Singer Paul Banks has lost faith in his romantic partner ever being there to support him, so he throws his arms open to the majesty of New York City to fulfill and heal him. Chris?
Yeah, this is one of those songs that proves that every once in a while a scarecrow can get his brain and a tin man can get his heart. Because, like you said, Interpol, yeah, I've never been able to stand this band either. But I will admit, good ballad and good sentiment. And again, it's a lonely in New York City song and or a reawakening. So a lot of these songs, there's one part of it is loneliness, one part of it is reawakening. There's the excitement of renewal. There's the burnout of day to day. There's all this range of emotions. It's all about experience. And here again, they really captured the one part of the experience of living in New York. Neat stuff.
All right. Number 13, Simon and Garfunkel again, with the 59th Street Bridge song, parentheses, Feelin' Groovy, from 1966. From the heavy-heartedness of the previous song, we go into probably the most lighthearted on this list, and also one of the most irresistibly charming and, frankly, one of the best. Leave it to Paul Simon, a nice Jewish boy from Flushing, Queens, to write a jaunty little folk pop ode to the bridge that connects Queens to Manhattan without sounding even the slightest bit corny or trite. And you'll find this hard to believe, Chris, but I never bought weed from the 59th Street Bridge.
Oh, actually, the 59th Street Bridge is what I walked across to get home on 9/11.
So did I.
Yeah, there you go. But
not feeling groovy.
Not feeling groovy there, but one thing I'll say about the song, da 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 da, just a really happy, peppy song. It's a wonderfully, like you said, lighthearted, upbeat, and positive song. It's only 1 minute and 43 seconds long, but it's a really long 1 minute and 43 seconds because of how joyous the song is. I think this song belongs much higher on this list. I would have put it closer to the top 5. But
wow,
once in a while you have to make compromises in these things, and so it ends up at lucky number 13.
Right, higher than Interpol.
Yeah, well, good.
Number 12, Bobby Womack with Across 110th Street from 1973. One of several songs about Harlem on this list, as you listeners may have noticed. This is, I think, and Chris probably thinks too, the second best one. Wait until we get to number 3 on this list. And comes off the soundtrack to the 1972 blaxploitation film of the same name. The single came out 1 year later. Soul singer Bobby Womack takes the usual blaxploitation movie soundtrack tropes, the wah-wah pedal guitar, the dramatically sweeping strings, the tight and punchy rhythm, and sharpens them to a finely honed paintbrush as he paints a stark image of Harlem, incorporating pimps, hookers, drug dealers, and junkies that's as evocative as anything Lou Reed ever wrote. However, there is a strong optimism in Womack's vision as he trusts in people's basic desire to survive and not give in. In fact, Womack has inspired me to watch that movie this weekend. I just downloaded it. Chris?
Yeah, and that movie is unintentionally hilarious because it's so melodramatic and over the top. And strange but true, Anthony Quinn plays the white cop.
Nothing says Harlem like the guy who played Yorba the Greek.
Yeah. yeah, exactly. It's a cheesy movie. I prefer to think of it as the credits song to Jackie Brown. That's where it shows up in Quentin Tarantino's 1997. Very, very, very underrated.
Yes, very underrated.
Heist. Well, basically, it's a crime drama and love story all in one. And it's really, really neat the way that Tarantino uses it at the end when the Pam Grier character is foregoing a romance or a long-term romance with Robert Forster's character, and she's kind of in that kind of longing or that wistful phase, and she's singing along to this song of all songs, which kind of says that maybe love is a battlefield too. So it's really, really nice, and so that's what I think of when I think of Across 110th Street.
Right. Number 11, The Pogues with Fairy Tale of New York, the single released in 1987. The Pogues made their name, they were an Irish band, by taking traditional Irish folk music and putting it through a prism of punk rock attitude while also giving it a firm rock and roll kick in the ass. Yep. This song doubles as not just a quintessentially New York City song, it's also a Christmas song.
Yep.
Well, more accurately, Christmas in New York as the background to a dysfunctional couple of Irish immigrants who arrived in New York, fell in love with each other and their dreams, and ended down in the dumps of alcoholism and drug addiction while one of them is singing the song from a prison cell. Christopher Thomas O'Connor, what say you, my wee lad?
Kristen McCall, got to give her a shout out. She plays the wife or the girlfriend part of this couple, and it doubles as a great Christmas song too, because it's like, Christmas is one of those times where if you haven't had a great year, Christmas, it's always like, where did it all go wrong, man? Where did it all go wrong? So I've had some depressing Christmases in my life, and so this kind of captures that beautifully. You can't call it one of the best Christmas songs ever made, but it's one of the most unusual Christmas songs for sure. And calling it Fairy Tale of New York kind of marks the Pogues' trademark humor. They had a real deadpan, real sort of what would you call it? Almost gallows humor.
Yes, definitely.
That this song definitely captures. And I like how it starts off as like being this like beautiful, heartbreaking ballad, and then like revs up into sort of a folk duel or a folk duo performance duet.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, good stuff.
Speaking of gallows humor, ooh boy, does this next song have it? Number 10, The Heartbreakers, not Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Another band called The Heartbreakers with their single Born to Lose from 1977. Johnny Thunders was the lead guitarist and one of the creative forces behind the early 1970s glam punk icons, the New York Dolls. They were mean, nasty, loved to wear women's clothing, and didn't give a fuck what you thought about it. And judging from interviews with them from that period, They sweat, bled, talked, walked, and breathed New York City in all its subterranean, sordid splendor. So when Thunders, a notorious heroin junkie who co-authored Chinese Rocks with fellow junkie and Ramones bassist Dee Ramone, when he formed his own band, the Heartbreakers, and cut this scathing single, Born to Lose, about how hard life in the city was, there was no doubt Thunders was talking about the Big Apple. One of the single greatest punk rock songs ever recorded. It has the immortal line, living in the jungle ain't so hard. Living in the city will eat out your heart. Chris?
Yeah, you stole my thunder because, you stole my Johnny Thunders because I was going to quote that lyric too. I love that. It is an immortal lyric, and that chorus is Born to Lose, because it's a great anthem for anybody who's ever felt like a fuck up.
Yeah,
for sure.
Totally. All right, number 9. LCD Sound System with New York, I Love You, But You're Bringing Me Down from 2007. I mentioned earlier how this band, The Strokes, and Vampire Weekend were probably the big 3 of 21st century New York bands. Well, in my opinion, LCD were the best with their sharp, sleek, unbeatable mix of disco and funk-fueled indie dance music. This track, however, off their masterpiece album, Sound of Silver, isn't a dance song at all. It's a dramatic piano ballad dedicated not to a lost lover, but to New York City's lost dirtiness, a condemnation of the gentrification that has gripped the city and priced out the middle and working classes since the 1990s and stripped it of its, well, at least in LCD main man James Murphy's eyes, its rugged heart and sweaty soul. Yes, pre-Giuliani New York was dangerous and crime-ridden. Aside from being more affordable, it also had its own flavor, its own culture, a uniqueness that wasn't smothered by nonstop wall-to-wall Starbucks and the Gap, not overrun by rich trust fund kids who want to remake the city into their caricatured Disneyland version of New York. This is not only one of the best songs on this list, but it's the one whose sentiment I identify with the most. Chris?
Yeah, I agree too, because remember, we lived there in the late 90s and aughts, up to the mid aughts, and that's what was happening. And really, you can call this song, you can really call the Elegy of Williamsburg. Yeah, because it's really about those folks that that were very DIY. Williamsburg was a very DIY, right, and very sort of vagabond, right, shared experience type of neighborhood. And a lot of these bands, the Strokes and James Murphy and all his DFA bands, including LCD, they came from. And so it's an elegy of that. And it turns out Mike Bloomberg is really the bad guy. Like, our billionaire mayor thinks he's a king, being the line. But what I love about this song is it's got a poignancy and a point of view to it that's pretty unique. But also, it's what takes the Sound of Silver, the album, from being very good into a masterpiece. Yeah, it's what elevates this album into one of the best, one of the top 5 records of the 2000s.
The noughties,
well, the noughties, but just the 2000s, like this century. I think it's one of the top 5 rock albums of this century, and I think this one is what gets it over the top. And fuck gentrification. I sometimes I find myself, like, just this week I found myself pining to maybe give the city one last shot. That I found myself really missing New York, and then I'm like, you know what? Fuck that. There's a reason I left. I left for good. I mean, I lived out in the burbs, but I left for good in 2014, because when you're 38 at that, with everything that had happened that this song kind of captures, the party was over, man. And so if I wanted to go back, I'd be trying to live in the past. Can't do it.
Yeah. Well, you can live in the past with the next song. Number 8, The Rolling Stones with Shattered from 1978. Speaking about New York back when it was down and dirty, here are the Stones with one of their most convincing stabs at punk and new wave from Some Girls, their last masterpiece album. Supposedly written by Mick Jagger while he was riding in the back of a New York City taxi, one would think he was disparaging the city in a vicious diatribe. While love and hope and sex and dreams are still surviving on the streets, he's lamenting the shallowness of the upscale Manhattan elite with their cocktail parties and some kind of fashion. Loneliness and sex and sex and sex and sex. People hungry for success, success, success. Does it matter? I'll admit it's a bit rich to hear a Philistine like Jagger say that, quote, try to enjoy greed and sex. That's what makes our town the best. Yeah, really, Mick?
Yeah,
anyway.
I was going to say, yeah.
7th Avenue, West Side, bed bugs, maggots crawling out of the Big Apple. Wow, Mick must be pissed off. But hold on. The very, very cheeky way he delivers his lyrics belies a serious irony, which means there must be some affection he has for New York. Whereas James Murphy earnestly pours out his soul in the previous song, Jagger, rather true to form, really, shows his love for the city like a true New Yorker, full of snarky attitude and wink-wink humor. Chris?
Yeah, this is a case, and you alluded to it, where you can admire the narration, if not the narrator.
Yeah.
It's like you got to take that with a grain of salt. That if anybody soaked up the excesses of which he complains about, it was Jagger. But But the thing about the song that is just odd to me is that it really equates sex with physical dirt. That it's a dirty city. And why is it a dirty city? And that deep down in the dirt, there's a whole lot of sex going on.
Right.
It's almost like, it's like he's having sex on the floor of a roach-infested, dirty-ass, dusty motel, like one of those flop houses that you get in, like up in Washington Heights is full of these flop houses where you go in for an hour to get a blowjob. It's a very strange metaphor. But other than that, I think you hit the nail on.
It's a very gripping and effective metaphor. Sure. And the fact that this is probably maybe the most visually evocative song on this whole list.
Yeah, it could be. It really is. It spares no prisoners. That's for sure.
Yeah. I mean, if there's anyone who can find the sex in anything, it's Mick Jagger.
Well, yeah, no shit. I mean, he's the embodiment of the old joke of the guy who finds the genie on the bottle, and the guy says, the genie says, you can have any wish that you want. And the guy says, I want to be surrounded by pussy. So the genie turns him into a tampon.
That's a good one.
Yeah.
Okay. Number 7, Elton John with Mona Lisa and Mad Hatters from 1972. His album of that year, Honky Chateau, may have had Rocket Man, but this is probably my all-time favorite Elton John song. Elton's lyricist, Bernie Taupin, has always been a rather elusive, enigmatic writer, which has always been a good thing since his words always lent Elton's grandiose pop rock a subliminal and subversive edge. Beyond referencing Spanish Harlem, Broadway, and the subway, Taupin really gets at the heart of the class conflict and divide that has always existed in New York's cold, gray heart. He'll go his way alone, grow his own seeds shall be sown in New York City, but that's out of necessity. Why? The chorus gives it away. Sons of bankers, sons of lawyers turn around and say good morning to the night, for unless they see the sky, but they can't. And that is why they know not if it's dark outside or light. The rich don't give a fuck and never will, even and especially in New York. Chris?
Yeah, that's another aspect that we haven't really touched on, but this song, I think, beautifully captures is there's a class divide.
Yeah.
There's a cultural divide, and, you can talk about the light and the darkness, or, the bright lights and the dark streets and all of that, but you don't really talk about it in terms of money, looking down on people that don't have money. If there's one place in the world where the money does not trickle down, it's New York.
Yeah.
It's a different world when you have money in New York. It's especially in the 70s. Richard Pryor had a joke that cocaine was God's gift to people who made too much money. And I think that New York was like that. And so I think this city kind of captures that people are, the rich are just clueless about the poor are really clueless about the rich. Why? Because the rich ain't ever going to let the poor in unless they're like serving the drinks or like cleaning the sheets.
Right.
So there you go.
Yeah. Number 6, Simon and Garfunkel, once again, with The Sound of Silence from 1965, the famous electric folk rock version that came out in 65. It originally came out on an album in 1964 in a very sparse acoustic version, but we're talking about this version, the single that came out in the fall of 65. As far as commercial success and enduring status as an iconic pop song goes, this probably should be number 1. But if we're judging purely on the basis of being about or taking place in New York, there are a few others that rate above this one. In any case, Paul Simon never mentions New York by name, nor does he reference any streets or places by name. But if you know anything about Paul Simon's work, you know there's only one big city he's usually talking about.
Yep.
I briefly mentioned earlier when discussing the Sting song on our list about whenever you're in a big city, the more crowded and the more people there are, the more people's barriers come up and the more the feeling of loneliness creeps in. That loneliness leads to darkness, and loneliness, and this song, at least the way I interpret it, is Simon's version of his very own Dark Night of the Soul, New York City style. Chris?
Yeah, I don't think that there's a better lyric that captures the down part of living day to day in New York than "Hello, Darkness, My Old Friend." Just really a beautiful evocation of that feeling, of that mood, of that that part of New York. When you go to New York, you kind of give up part of yourself to the city. There's you can be anonymous, but you also become the New York City version of yourself, which some days is not the best thing. And so there's a grief. There's almost a grief to that. And so, hello, darkness, my old friend. It's me grieving my old life and grieving that that New York is so schizophrenic in a way.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, well, it gets a bit darker next. Number 5, Stevie Wonder with "Living for the City" from 1973. Stevie Wonder is from Detroit, but boy, did he ever write the best and most striking stranger in a strange land tale of poor innocent kids coming to New York ever written.
Right.
Peter Gabriel went on about a poor Puerto Rican kid lying down like a lamb on Broadway. But Stevie gives us the story of a poor Mississippi kid who takes a bus to New York and in his first day gets busted by the cops and sentenced to 10 years in prison for just walking across the street with a drug dealer's stash. Yikes. Overall, New York is basically portrayed in allegorical terms. The big city is just a metaphor for how cruel and unfair the world can be to poor Black Americans. It's also one of the funkiest, chunkiest grooves Wonder ever committed to tape off what I think is his best album, Inner Visions. Chris?
Yeah, agreed about his best album, Inner Visions. And also, I think musically, I think this, not easily, but I think musically, this is the best song on the entire list. If we're just talking about the music and the structure and the arrangement and all of that, it's just a rousing piece of music. It, like you said, it's got that funky beat. It's got that sort of soaring choruses, and the outro. It's one of the best outros. Like kind of stomp along. It's not even sing along. It's a stomp along outro. It's just incredible. And Wonder was just such a talent. And I think just even musically, he captures that lurking danger of the city, or those. It's a city where you can be anonymous, but it's really easy. It's not a city you want to get in trouble in, for sure. And I think that he kind of captures that menace, but he captures that menace in a funk groove, which is a really, really neat trick. And Wonder was a genius. And this musically to me is the best song on the record, or on this list.
Number 4, The Ramones with Rockaway Beach from 1977 off their third album, Rocket to Russia. This is, believe it or not, the highest charting single the Ramones ever had in America, peaking at number 66.
I could see it.
It isn't surprising, and frankly, it should have been higher. Many of the songs on this list are about the rougher and darker edges of New York, but this song is pure, sheer, unadulterated joy from start to finish. I've always said the Ramones were essentially sped up, rocked out Beach Boys melodies, and this song epitomizes that. The song is nothing more than about going on a bus to Rockaway Beach, located in Rockaway, Queens, with a group of friends, but it's so incessantly catchy and, most importantly, unaffected in its sincerity and innocence that you can't help but get caught up in it. This is not only the Ramones' own, but also it is all of New York City's Surfing USA. Chris?
Oh, absolutely. It's the happiest of all the happy songs. Boy, are they glad to be on that bus and having their outings out to Rockaway Beach. Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy, oh boy. Yeah, there's not much intellectualism to this song. It's just let's get away, and let's get away to a great place. I've never been to Rockaway Beach. Have you?
No, I want to go. I plan to go to New York in the near future, and I will go there.
Yeah, I was gonna say, you got to be a tourist. You got to take a photo of yourself in Rockaway Beach and post it in our Curmudgeonly community, man.
Yeah, wearing a Ramones t-shirt.
Yeah, wearing your Ramones t-shirt. That's what you got to do.
All right, number 3, The Velvet Underground with I'm Waiting for the Man from 1967. We're getting close to number 1. Lou Reed is back, this time with the band that kickstarted his career and revolutionized rock music forever, although it took a decade or so for people to catch on. Nevertheless, coming off the VU's unbelievably important and influential self-titled, with Nico, debut album, this song showcases Reed's literary author's eye for detail in vividly describing a scene that essentially tells a story. In the early 1960s, Reed, born in Brooklyn, teenage years spent in Long Island, went to Syracuse University in central New York State, like both of yours truly Curmudgeons,
Yep.
and would come back home every semester break. It was during this time that he developed a heroin addiction, eventually bringing it back with him to Syracuse and even selling it out of his dormitory. Mm-hmm. This is coming from Anthony DeCurtis's brilliant biography of Lou Reed. You should check it out whenever you get a chance, if any of you are Lou fans. In any case, this rather or nearly biographical song is a harrowing, impressionistic depiction of the throes of addiction, with Reed explicitly putting you right in the center of Harlem on 125th Street and Lexington Avenue as he, or the narrator, is waiting for his man in a big straw hat who's never early and always late. Local people in the neighborhood go up to him. Hey, white boy, what you doing uptown? Hey, white boy, are you chasing our women around? Oh no, the furthest from his mind, and not because he's racist, he just wants that smack. It is a sordid Hubert Selby novel in a rock and roll song with a savage, incessant, head-crushing groove to drive it home. Chris?
Yeah, this song is incredible. I love the riff. I love the feel of it, and it really does kind of capture that inherent scuzziness that Reed is singing about. And here's the thing that always kind of cracks me up about the song. So, the second line in it is, I'm waiting for my man. Then he says $26 in my hand. Yeah. Well, this is 1967. $26 could probably buy you a shitload of heroin. So
back then, yeah. Like I said, he was taking it back with him to Syracuse.
Oh, I got you. So, well, there you go. That explains the $26. I always wondered about that because I was like, holy crap, that must have been like at least 10 balloons.
Dude, read the Anthony DeCurtis book. He was selling it out of his dorm room back in the early 60s in Syracuse. On the SU campus.
Yeah, I know. We're a couple of Syracuse University alums, so it's like, wait a second. People were selling drugs out of their dorm rooms in Syracuse? Holy shit. No way, man. Yeah, Syracuse is one of those towns, like there was the Marshall Street neighborhood, but other than that, basically, like drinking and getting stoned was what you did. That was kind of the pastime up there.
Yeah.
It was really bizarre.
Yeah.
So
all right, number 2, Lou Reed again with Walk on the Wild Side from 1972. Yes, folks, Lou again. I wasn't kidding when I said he was the definitive quintessential New York City rock star. And here he is on his most famous song and biggest hit, and frankly, one of the most notorious songs of the 1970s. Lyrically, it's a person-by-person name check of all the colorful characters who populated Andy Warhol's social circle during the mid to late 1960s, particularly the gay, transvestite, and transgender folks of that scene. But you don't need lyrics referencing hustling in New York and coming out from Long Island to know that this is a New York song. The jazzy, airbrushed drums, the sultry saxophone giving a soft touch, the mystery film noir evoking string section. It's New York's ineffable sexuality put on a delectable stick. Chris?
yeah, this may be the most sensual song on this record, with the colored girls sing doot 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 doot. Yeah, and so it's just there's a sensuality. It's not even a sexuality; it's a sensuality, and it's a real. There's a real depth to the sound. There's real texture going on there, and given that it's probably the catchiest, most tuneful song about transvestite prostitutes of all time. It's a really neat trick. God bless Transformer era Lou Reed. He got away with a lot.
He did. Totally did.
And so if there's anyone on this list that could compete with Lou Reed as being the most New York guy there, it would be the person that is behind our number one song about New York City. Arturo, what is that number one song?
It is Billy Joel with New York State of Mind from 1976. This list is all about rock songs that are about or take place in New York. This song happens to hit both those criteria. Like the Avett Brothers song we talked about earlier, this is about coming back to the warm, welcome bosom of the Big Apple. But there's more going on here besides romantically referencing riding a Greyhound on the Hudson River line, Chinatown, Riverside, and the New York newspapers. Joel was living in Los Angeles for a while in the early 1970s, and his career didn't go so well there. He gives it away with the line, "It comes down to reality, and it's fine with me because I've let it slide." He's back in New York. He's glad he's back in New York, but the melancholy mood of the song, combined with the sadness and the aching in his voice, leads one to believe he'll never find the contentment he really wants. But isn't that what being a native New Yorker is all about? You miss it when you leave, but you're never fully satisfied when you come back. It's a quandary that can only be psychologically fostered by a city that is defined by its dualities and contradictions, of which there are many. Billy Joel, particularly peak period Joel of the mid-1970s through to the early 80s, was a really underrated lyricist in regard to the richness and depth he was able to convey. New York State of Mind, his conflicted love letter to his hometown, is the perfect example of that. Chris?
Yeah, there's something about, he's right, about coming back to New York. And I kind of experienced this a little bit because remember, I was out in Phoenix for a couple of years, and then so I took a couple of years off and then came back to New York in 2005. And I kind of got that. It's like, you're glad to be back, but oh man, I'm back.
Yeah.
There is a certain, like you said, that the contradictory mindset of I'm content to be here for now because I understand that there's nothing else, no place in the world like New York. But oh man, there's no place else in the world quite like New York, man. And like you said, so that capturing that duality, so it's not only talking up the city and contrasting it with other places. It's also about, like you said, the return of the prodigal son, not exactly on the best of terms. My favorite thing about this song is how he that line about the New York Times and the New York Daily News,
Yeah.
and sort of being like the two, like the yin and the yang
Yeah.
of New York, and sort of captures the dual personality. That's a perfect way to do it, especially because I'm an old newspaper guy.
Yeah.
And I love that. I love that that juxtaposition. Really, really awesome. Really awesome. And there you go, folks. The top 40 songs about New York, ending with New York State of Mind. Go seek it out as soon as you can. As we are want to do in these episodes when we end them, we invite everyone to join our Curmudgeonly community on Facebook. Art is still in year list mania for studio albums by year. I got that right finally.
Yes.
Yeah, just did 1981. 1982 is on the way.
Yes, it is.
Yeah, we've had some vibrant conversations up there. I will become a more frequent participant in the community. I've been a little negligent, but I'm going to be back up there, and it's going to be a rousing time had by all. If you disagree with anything on this list, if you think that we missed any songs, or you're really mad that we had fucking Billy Joel at number one, feel free to write us at curmudgeonrock@gmail.com. We are still on Twitter or X or whatever the hell it's called, but less and less. That place has become a cesspool. So go check us out, but I don't know if I'm as enthusiastic as I used to be about that. And then also, we promise we'll make a Spotify playlist with all 40 of these songs so that you will have an instant access reference as you go through the list, and we talk lovingly and gushingly about these songs.